today with two key figures in the expedited policy development process. Keith Drazik, chair of the GNSO, the Generic Name Supporting Organization, Rafiq Damek, GNSO Council Liaison to the EPDP team. Keith, let's start with you. The EPDP Phase 1 final report has been completed. For lay observers, please explain what the culmination of this Phase 1 means.
Thanks, Brad, and thanks for having us here today to give you and everybody an update. The Phase 1 stage of the EPDP, the Expedited Policy Development process, was geared towards replacing the temporary specification that was imposed by the ICANN board back in May of 2018. And that temporary specification had a lifespan of no more than 12 months. So the Phase 1 final report is essentially a recommendation from the ICANN community to replace that temporary specification with a consensus policy recommendation. That recommendation was approved by the GNSO Council on March 4th, and it is now out for a public comment period that will inform the board's consideration as it looks to approve the consensus policy recommendations prior to May 25th of this year, when the temporary specification expires. The temporary specification was important because it allowed for the ICANN to continue to enforce certain contractual provisions, but to ensure that those contractual provisions were not in violation of the GDPR.
Okay. Rafiq, give us a basic overview of the policy recommendations that are in Phase 1.
So basically, those recommendations were to be compliant with GDPR, and so we follow with what GDPR is asking for. So the EPDP team focused first to list all the purposes needed for the collection of data, then about the transfer of data between the different entities, then what are the data elements that need to be displayed and those need to be redacted, and then thinking about what are the consensus policy, the current consensus policy, they will be impacted by those recommendations, and then thinking about the implementation itself and to ensure there is that how to fill the gap for the implementation between when we are providing this recommendation policy and when we will get the consensus policy enforced. And last, since we try to cover as much as possible, we still had to defer some items or topics to the Phase 2. So basically, that's what were the outcome of our policy recommendation for Phase 1.
Keith, Rafiq just mentioned Phase 2. Give us an overview of Phase 2 planning and the work that's been done by the EPDP team during ICANN64.
Sure. So as I noted, the Phase 1 work was intended to replace the temporary specification, and that recommendation is now out there for public comment. The Phase 2 work is the follow-on work that will build on Phase 1 to develop and implement a standardized system for access to non-public registration data. It is also something that's been termed a uniform access model or unified access model, but essentially developing the policies that will inform how third parties get access and how contracted parties disclose data that is currently not available publicly. So the Phase 2 work is a very important component of the overall expedited policy development process, the EPDP, and the group this week has had several meetings under Rafiq as the acting chair, going into Phase 2, has been coordinating the work of the group, trying to look towards the planning and essentially developing the work plan for the Phase 2 effort. So this really has been here in Kobe a transition period for the group that worked extremely hard over the last 6 or 7 months to develop the Phase 1 recommendations, to actually now transition into looking at the next phase of the work to design and develop the policies around this standardized system for access and disclosure.
So in that context, what's next after ICANN64?
So great question, and there's a number of different work tracks that will be taking place. We will have the Phase 2 policy work, we will have the Phase 1 implementation work, We will also have an engagement between contracted parties and ICANN on some contractual developments. And as Rafiq noted earlier, there are some components of the phase 1 work that were deferred to phase 2, in large part due to the tight timelines and the deadline required on phase 1 because of the 12-month time frame and deadline based on the temporary specification. So there's probably 3 or 4 different work tracks going into phase 2 and the associated work of implementation of the phase 1 recommendations.
So it sounds like there's a lot of work, a lot of very intense work that has to be done still.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
very
you, Brad.
much.